Welcome back, folks. It's Chris here with Indaba Africa once more. And today, just recently, just a short time ago in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke to the nation and talked about measures related to South Africa's lockdown. So I'd like to fade back a little bit in time here because we didn't get a chance to talk about it yesterday and discuss the lockdown in Zimbabwe and what is happening with the current Wuhan coronavirus, or COVID-19 by its scientific designation. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started talking about Zimbabwe. Well, on Sunday, April 19th, President Emerson Mnangagwa announced that the lockdown would be extended for an additional 14 days in Zimbabwe. That will take the lockdown in Zimbabwe out to May 3rd, 2020. Now, the reason he gave for that is he said that Zimbabwe has not yet met the conditions set by the World Health Organization for lifting restriction measures that were imposed back in March. Now, the list of restriction measures, there are 6 standards that the World Health Organization has offered for countries to follow. They're very subjective, and I may talk about them shortly here. But let's talk about what's happening specifically with the lockdown in Zimbabwe. All right, so while the lockdown has been extended and applies to much of the country, the mining industry will be allowed to resume full operations. And manufacturing industry will be allowed to do limited capacity manufacturing. That is an undefined term as to what that means, but there will be some manufacturing taking place. Understandable that the mining industry is allowed to go back to work. It is a main source of hard currency income for the bankrupt government of Harare, and so they would definitely want that in. But it does pose its own risk. Just to put things in perspective here with what's going on in Zimbabwe, at this stage, after now nearly 4 months of the COVID-19 virus having made its escape or exit from China and spread around the planet, in Zimbabwe today we have 25 confirmed cases of COVID-19. No, I didn't mumble, not 25,000, not 2.5 million, but 25 confirmed cases with 3 fatalities. By comparison, as we end the wet season, the high season for malaria in Zimbabwe, this season, and the peak of that season is February, March, and April. We're approaching the end of it now. This season, 135,585 confirmed cases of malaria have been reported, with 131 fatalities. That would be 128 more fatalities that have been caused by or attributed to COVID-19. That is in 201 separate outbreaks of malaria around the country. Yes. But we don't shut the country down for malaria. We do shut it down for this disease. I'm not comparing the two. I'm just trying to put things in perspective here. While COVID-19 has had 25 confirmed cases and 3 fatalities assessed as having been COVID-19 attributed to it, there have been 135,585 cases of malaria in Zimbabwe with 131 fatalities. Also, in the lockdown extension of 14 days to May 3rd, President Mnangagwa didn't really address the informal sector. That's problematic given that as much as 80% of those who are actually gainfully employed in some fashion in Zimbabwe work in the informal sector. And it is impossible for them to get anything done. Now, some people who work in the informal sector, it's very difficult for them to be working because of the nature of the things they do. For instance, as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you are a barber or someone who does nails in a salon, it's going to be very difficult to resume work and maintain social distance because you have to be close to and touch people. So that would be something that couldn't necessarily be alleviated in the short term. But there are other creative methods and measures to help the informal sector, such as using soccer stadiums and soccer pitches, as well as schools and empty facilities in the open where you could have open air markets to allow informal traders to do their business and have government officials or police or whomever is appropriate, even the military or volunteers present to keep social distancing. But this is not a step that Zimbabwe is taking. And quite in contrast, as the president was announcing his measures on Sunday, actions taking place in Harare, the capital, city officials with the help of police and the Zimbabwe Defense Force were tearing down what they termed illegal market stalls used by the formal traders in townships. So rather than help the informal sector, the ZANU-PF government is going out of its way to harass and harm the informal sector. Bear in mind, once again, that 80% of Zimbabweans who actually have any source of employment before COVID-19 were working in the informal sector. It kind of beggars the imagination what is going on and what people are thinking about. Well, additionally, the government has a relief program, an allowance of 200 Zim dollars for each family to help tide them over. Now, for those of you not living in Zimbabwe, let me help put that in perspective. 200 Zim dollars on the street comes out to about $5 US. Now, how in the world is the family supposed to buy up $5 US? Now, I understand Harare doesn't have any money because the country has failed macroeconomic policies, not to mention its past abrogation of the rule of law, stripping and theft of assets of Zimbabweans and foreign nationals who've invested in their economy. So it's left them in a dire situation. Nonetheless, there are options. They could sell assets, change their laws overnight to allow people to take advantage of purchasing and bring some cash in, which could be used to help out those in need. Now, with the mining sector going back to work, my question is this: will the mining sector revenue all be diverted to alleviating the human impact, the healthcare impact from COVID-19? What will happen to those revenues, both the royalties and the tax revenue that accrue to the state? And for any state-owned enterprises that are involved in mining, will all of their revenue be contributed to helping the ordinary average Zimbabwean? Somehow I doubt that. We shall see. Anyway, what is really needed here, what's missing is that, and if you look at the news reports, no matter which newspaper you go through, I've got a few of them here. I'll make a few comments. So in Newsday, the Zimbabwe Congress Trade Union President Peter Mutasa said that Mnangagwa should have announced stronger safety net measures for poverty-stricken citizens, given the majority of people live in abject poverty. I would agree with the president of ZCTU, or the ZCTU, President Peter Mutasa said. Now, there's a quote from him. He said, "There's a need to balance safety and health of citizens on one side and the economy on the other side. It was never going to be easy. We're therefore happy that he chose to follow medical experts' advice, especially the WHO's guidance, and prioritize health over economic factors." Well, that's an interesting statement coming from someone who runs a trade union. They're usually concerned about the labor and employment needs and benefits of their members, but I understand where he's coming from. Nonetheless, he is one of these folks that said the $200 Zim per month to vulnerable groups. The process has also been marred by secrecy on the benefits of who gets it, and with reports on politicization where ZANU-PF supporters are allegedly being prioritized. Well, those are allegations. Don't know if there's any truth in them, but the bottom line is this, is that there is a desperate need for transparency. That is not something that ZANU-PF is accustomed to or comfortable with having, transparency, being open and honest with the public about what's going on. And so that puts them kind of in a bind now as they try to attempt to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, not accustomed to sharing with the public what the public needs to know. So that need for transparency is greater now than it ever has been, and the need for information, public information, is greater now than it's ever been. So, David Coulthard, a former education minister from the Movement for Democratic Change, issued a long op-ed piece that came out over the weekend as well, talking about things that President Mnangagwa should consider and steps he should take. It wasn't entirely critical of Mnangagwa, but it was offering different actions that the government should take. Now, David Coulthard's pretty well known. He's a lawyer and a human rights lawyer, and as I said, the former education secretary or minister. This was published in the Standard, so that's thestandard.co.zw. If you'd like to read it, I'm not going to read it. It's 4 pages here, but David Coulthard puts out an interesting op-ed about that. So the government of Zimbabwe has said that it will only lift the lockout restrictions on the public when they have met the conditions that the WHO has established. Well, that's going to be a bit of a challenge, ladies and gentlemen, because there are 6 conditions that the WHO has established. I'll read through them quickly, and I will point out something that is a problem with them. Now, this is something that makes a lot of sense, but it's not something that's quantifiable in most cases. So, number 1, disease transmission is under control, and how do you determine that? What's the benchmark for that? Number 2, health systems are able to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and trace every contact. Yeah, we can't do that with influenza. How are we possibly going to do that with COVID-19? Hotspots are minimized in vulnerable places such as nursing homes. That's achievable. Schools, workplaces, number 4, and other essential places have established preventive measures. Okay, we can address that. Number 5, the risk of importing new cases can be minimized. How do we do that? How do we determine how to minimize this? Number 6, communities are fully educated, engaged, and empowered to live under a new normal. I don't like the sound of that new normal. It sounds to me very much like a totalitarian streak in the now discredited World Health Organization, or Organ of the United Nations, where over half the budget goes to staff salaries and travel each year. And these are very subjective measures. Nonetheless, folks, I hope you enjoyed this brief discussion on Zimbabwe. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel right down there. Give us a like and leave your comments. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you next time here on Indaba Africa.